Today is Wednesday, July the 8th, 2020. It's 2 p.m. We're going to start our meeting. Commission Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Chairman Briscoe.
Here.
Commissioner Waters.
Present.
Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Ecker.
Here.
Commissioner Brinkman.
Present.
We have a quorum.
All right, very good. Good afternoon. I trust that everyone had a happy and safe 4th of July. And thanks again to Pam and Jennifer and all the technical folks for setting up these virtual meetings so we can continue to conduct business for the benefit of the citizens of the state of Missouri. I want to share a few friendly tips for all of us to follow during today's meeting while we use this technology. Mute your microphone when you're not speaking. Please use the presentation only view if video conferencing to reduce the draw on your internet. Speak slowly, clearly, and at a loud enough volume level to be heard well. There will be some hesitation between people speaking and hearing. Please pause and allow enough time to pass before moving on. Remember, nothing is perfect. If your connection isn't working correctly, please disconnect and reconnect. You may need to change from video conference to teleconference per the instructions provided by the Commission Secretary. There are several items we would normally do when we meet in person, but today, due to the individual remote meeting locations, we'll be unable to do so. These items include our safety minute, recognition of special guests, and public comment period. We do, however, have a procedural item we will continue to follow today regarding abstentions. I will review our abstention process for you. There are commissioners that because of land ownership or business interests, or the lawyers may represent clients that may either have some relationship to a matter coming before the commission, may have a potential or actual conflict of interest to be considered or voted upon. The commission member will indicate if he or she, wait a minute, we don't have any she commissioners yet, if he or she chooses to abstain from voting or to recuse himself from participating in the discussion of an agenda item. If an agenda item is divisible by contract, call, project, or the like, a commissioner may specify that particular matter and then still vote on the remainder of the agenda item. This information is provided to the Commission Secretary by letter in advance of the meeting. The Commission Secretary will duly indicate the abstentions or recusals accordingly in the minutes of the meeting. Madam Secretary, have the necessary letters been prepared?
They have.
Thank you. All right, the next item is an action item. It's consideration of the minutes of our regular meeting, which was held on June the 3rd. So the first item of business is consideration of those minutes. Is there anybody got any additions or corrections to those minutes?
Mr. Chairman, I make the motion we approve the minutes from June 3rd, 2020. Second.
All right. Do we have to have can we do a voicemail on that?
Voice vote.
Voice vote? All in favor of that motion, say aye, please.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? No. Motion carries. The minutes are approved. The next business item is the consideration of items on the consent agenda. Does anyone need to remove any item for discussion later or to abstain from an item?
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Okay. Motion carries. All right, now we'll move on to the committee and board reports. Commissioner Waters serves as chair of the audit committee. Commissioners Brinkman and Ecker also serve on the audit committee. Commissioner Waters, do you have a report?
There's no audit report this month. Our next meeting is scheduled for November.
Thank you. Commissioner Waters and I serve as co-chairs of the Legislative Committee, and he will give today's report.
Back on June 30th, which is the day before the new fiscal year, Governor Parsons announced several spending restrictions. Some of those cuts included $500,000 from general revenue for U.S. Route 61 bypass, $170,000 from the state road fund for an on-off ramp and maintenance. He restricted $5 million from the state road fund for low volume roads, and $1.1 million from general revenue for airport improvements at the University of Central Missouri in Warrensburg. He also previously restricted $4.1 million in general revenue for ports. That could be released later if the general revenue collections increase. Governor has until July 15th to review all the legislative proposals that passed during the last session. And I believe we have a veto session potentially scheduled for September. We'll have more next month. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Commissioner Waters. Commissioner Smith serves as president of the MHTC, and Commissioner Waters is a board member along with Commissioner Ecker. And Commissioner Smith will provide the report for us today.
Can you hear me now?
Can now, yeah.
Hear me now? Okay.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, I do not have a report this month. Our next MTFC meeting is scheduled for August, so I will have a report in August. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I serve on the MPERS board along with Commissioners Smith and Brinkman, and today I will provide the report. The board met on June 18, 2020. At this meeting, the board approved the fiscal year 2021 budget and received the results of the actuarial audit. The fiscal year 2021 business plan was presented, and a couple of board rules were modified. Primary action taken by a vote of 6 for and 5 against to authorize the chief investment officer to borrow for investment purposes up to 20% of the value of the assets of the plan, or at the time of the vote, it was approximately $470 million. The director of the commission the director and the commissioners have concerns regarding the borrowing against the retirement fund. I'll have Director McKenna elaborate on that in a minute. I just want to briefly note that the next board meeting is scheduled for September 24th, 2020. Director McKenna, would you like to add anything to that report?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you said it well. There were dissenting votes on the budget, on the presentation of an asset liability study, and on the authorization of borrowing. I was a dissenting vote on all 3 of those items for reasons that will be documented in the minutes. And as we started last month, when those minutes become available, we'll make sure to put them into the record here at the commission meeting when they're available. On the budget matter, concerns that we're not incorporating a lot of the total spending as part of the budget authorization. That's been an ongoing concern for a number of years. Trying to chip away at that, but to give you an idea, the budget did not include the $35 million approximately estimated in management fees that the system pays out. With regard to the asset liability study, concerns expressed regarding the amount and percentage of alternative investments, including disclosures that in our primary portfolio for public equities, up to 72% of the public equities are secured by derivative financial instruments. That's a bit of a surprise to those of us that heard that. And then, as you mentioned, I think, and said well, concerns about the potential authorization of borrowing against the portfolio, which we believe injects extra cost and enables investing in manners that we don't think are consistent with fiduciary stewardship. So I appreciate the opportunity to report on that, and more will follow. Thank you.
Okay, does anybody have any questions of Mr. or Director McKenna regarding his report? Okay, thank you very much for that. I just want to say it. I've been on that committee ever since I came on this commission, and for at least the first 2 or 3 years I was on there, it seemed to me that the major function of the staff, of the MPERS staff, was to brag on how well they were doing, which reminds me of somebody else we often see on TV. The next item on the agenda is Director's report. Patrick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Several weeks ago, I was able to appear at one of the governor's briefings to discuss highway safety and the effect the pandemic has had on transportation and MoDOT. We need to heighten the awareness of these safety issues every chance we get, and this was another opportunity to do so. Since May, we've done 10 statewide news releases about highway safety, and our safety campaigns are a constant focus of our social media platforms. Still, we continue to see alarming trends. A decrease in traffic volumes during the pandemic that we've experienced, yet a 12% increase in traffic fatalities have occurred this year. 12%, with 70% of those killed not wearing safety belts. Imagine that, 70% of all the fatalities on our system failed to do that simple act. Doesn't cost anything, doesn't take any time. It's not an infringement of your personal liberties. It's a safety device that works. And had more people involved in those crashes been buckled, there'd be another 100 people alive today here in Missouri. What a tragedy. What a continuing tragedy that is. For 3 straight years, we've seen a decline in traffic fatalities, only to experience this year's unfortunate increase. We need a commitment from drivers to buckle their seatbelts, put their phones down, and slow down. Summer is also the peak season for highway work zones, and we continue to see disturbing trends there also, with rampant disregard for speed reductions and lane restrictions, along with general inattention. Just a few weeks ago, 3 MoDOT vehicles were hit in the same week in the St. Louis area. In 2 of the 3 hits, the drivers just took off. We're looking at the data across the state to see what additional actions we can take to keep our workers as well as travelers safe in our work zones. One action we're considering is full road closures in areas where we're experiencing high vehicle hits. If that's what it takes to make sure our workers go home alive at the end of their shift, that's what we'll do. That's a difficult thing with the public. It's inconvenient. But again, we really have to keep not only our workers, but the private sector construction workers that are out there safe. It's imperative that motorists slow down and focus on the road while driving through work zones. It's for everybody's safety. I also wanted to give you an update. We talked last month, and certainly we've had conversations throughout about the impact of COVID-19 on transportation revenue. I wanted to give you an update on that. As I mentioned last month, we were off over $40 million from plan in terms of planned revenue. We just received a revenue report from the Department of Revenue late last week into early this week. And so that kind of caps out the reporting for the fiscal year. So that's the June report. When we're looking at impacts regarding COVID, though, we have to keep in mind that there is a lag in reporting from wholesale distribution on motor fuel taxes received. It's about a 2-month lag. So the June report is giving us information about April. We anticipated by correlating our traffic volumes that April really seems to be the lowest month in terms of traffic volume. And what we did see in terms of total gallonage consumed during that month was a drop of about 80 million gallons. That's on the overall. On the regular fuel, makes up about 75% of that number, and then we have diesel fuel, which we consider to be a reasonable proxy for commercial vehicle activity. The regular fuel was down about 30%, but the diesel was up nearly 18%. So we did see very strong commercial activity, and I think that's really a testament to the work that gets done in Missouri to move the nation's food supply not only from Missouri but through it. And it's an amazing job that the commercial trucking industry, the agricultural industry, food distribution networks, all of those really sprung to action during the COVID crisis. That's good news on the revenue front from that perspective. So on motor fuels, we were down about 25% overall for the month, with April as that economic activity. That's not bad. It's not great. But then what I'd like to say is the June report also carries probably the April activity in motor vehicle sales. And I just want to personally thank all the car dealers out there, and a shout out to Commissioner Smith for keeping your dealerships open and functioning, keeping people employed. The motor vehicle sales tax revenue was strong in the month of May. We were up over $8 million there. That helped offset a fair amount of the motor fuel tax losses. So we kind of end out the year at just about $40 million below plan. We still have the May motor fuel tax and June motor fuel tax to go through. But what we're seeing as the economy's been opened is that our traffic volumes are probably off now only about 10% statewide. A few pockets where it's a little higher than that. But considering at one point we were down in certain regions of the state at 45 to 50%, I think we can see kind of a tapering of that decline. That's good news. And as I mentioned last month, starting in March, to address the revenue decline, we took action. We limited discretionary spending on equipment and supplies, travel, all the things that you would consider discretionary, not related to the construction program. We slowed down hiring, and we delayed construction advertisement on about $360 million worth of projects. We also incorporated a shared work program and a reduction in pay for others. So about 80% of our employee base is on the shared work program. About 20% of the employee base is in a reduction in pay scenario. We have that designated as a 12-week period. We anticipate that that's going to save about $15 million. We also have limited overtime, and that limitation of overtime is probably going to save $3 to $5 million as well. So we've been taking action to do this. But in light of the revenue situation, and because of really pressing issues, we did just this week release the advertising for the Buck O'Neill Bridge. I think that's good news for everybody across the state, particularly the Kansas City region. And it's really important. A couple things to note there. That enables us to hit the schedule for obligating this project, which is a design-build project, about $250 million out of that 360 that we had delayed. But the cash flow is out into the future. So we still think we're balancing out the state road fund needs. We also have extraordinary participation from Kansas City, the region. They committed $72.5 million on a cost share basis from city community resources. That's extraordinary. That agreement's in hand. We've signed that agreement and moved forward with the advertisement. That also will ensure that we'll be able to obligate the funds on the federal cycle in time to receive the federal build grant, which is about $25 million. So on a huge partnership basis, the first $100 million really right out of the chute is coming from partnership at the federal and at the local level. Really great work by our team. Ed and Eric and the project team, Mary Miller, doing a fantastic job on that project. I'm very pleased that we were able to take that action because that's really what it's all about. And again, we are looking and we're going to continue to look at the revenue as we go forward. There are actions at the federal level as well that we're paying close attention to. We've worked with Senator Blunt's office. He actually has brought forward a bill that would provide some flexibility at the federal level to bring the federal share of construction projects up to as much as 100% on a temporary basis as a relief measure for state DOTs across the country. That would be truly welcome relief. We have been working on revenue backstop through AASHTO and with member states. We're looking to update the information about current revenue all across the country to make sure that Congress has that information as they look at making decisions there. And we're actively engaged in discussions and work toward reauthorizing the Federal Surface Transportation Act, the FAST Act, as it is currently in place, but expires September 30. So we are taking and have taken action, but we are also going to adjust. We've been looking at this on a weekly and monthly basis, and we think we have seen the trough in April, and we see traffic volumes that have resumed fairly well throughout the state. So the coming months, we do think we're going to be below estimates on revenue, but perhaps not quite as far down as if we had continued to have the economy shut down longer than it had been. So we're cautiously optimistic, and we've been on a cautious posture throughout, but I hope that the action to release the advertisement on Buck O'Neill is viewed as a good signal in terms of what we need to do going forward, and we'll continue to bring updates to the commission even throughout the month as needed as we continue to look at the revenue circumstance. And also, I just want to mention, I'm happy to report that Missouri was one of just 10 states this past month to receive what we received was a $1 million grant from the Federal Highway Administration to implement technologies that will improve mobility and safety for travelers. The grant's going to be used for predictive analytics on our I-270 project currently underway in St. Louis. The project team there is doing a terrific job. This is a really, it's not a large dollar amount. You know, when do you say $1 million is not a large dollar amount? Only in government, I guess, right? But this is really important. This is important primary research. The idea here is to collect data that we can put in the hands of highway users so that we can predict incidents before they happen based on weather conditions, based on events in the city and in the region, and help feed information into things like Waze and Google Maps and that sort of thing so people can avoid congestion before it happens. We think that by predicting the future that way and providing information to the travelers, we could actually bend the future a little bit by avoiding crashes. So that's it's a small investment that could have really big impacts. I happen to think this is one of the most exciting areas in transportation going forward because we literally could be looking at a multi-billion-dollar solution to a multi-trillion-dollar problem in the country. So we're right on the cutting edge of that, and our team's they did a great job with the application. I think Federal Highway is pretty excited about the grant as we are, and we'll keep you up to date on what we learned from this. And earlier this week, the Emery Sapp & Sons team broke ground on the Mineola Hill I-70 climbing lanes project in Montgomery County. You'll recall that this project was made possible by the federal infra grant we received last summer that will also enable replacement of the I-70 Missouri River Bridge at Rocheport. Fantastic job. This was a really tight schedule to obligate the funds. Our project director, Brandy Baldwin, and her team, they're working on this design build project. They really got this ready to go fast, and we're pretty excited about it. I know everybody's looking forward to a climbing lane at Mineola Hill on I-70 instead of trying to trying to predict when the truck pulls out in front of you and trying to get around it. So that's a huge safety improvement. It's an improvement to efficiency of the transportation and freight network, and that's the reason we received that grant. So with that, Mr. Chairman, that's my report.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or questions, Patrick, on his report?
No, Patrick, that's good news on the sales tax, and this fuel is crawling up a little, so that should increase our gas tax. But I think you'll see some good numbers again on the sales tax for this year. It's everybody's busy, so it's exciting.
It is. It is.
Okay, thank you, Patrick, for your report. The next item on the agenda is an action item. Travis Kessler, State Design Engineer, will present bids for our future consideration.
Good afternoon, Chairman Briscoe, Commissioners, Director McKenna. It's my pleasure to present the results of the June 19th bid opening. MoDOT received 24 bids on 5 calls, and we recommend the following to you today, and that's to award all the calls to the lowest responsive bidder. So pretty quick. That's our recommendations today for the June bid opening.
Anybody have any questions or comments for Travis?
No questions, Scott. Next month will be a pretty big one, won't it, Travis?
Well, July is actually, we did not have a scheduled bid opening in July. August right now is looking, we're still looking at the final information for August. Right now it's sitting around $31 million for August, and they get a little bit bigger as we move into the fall. So.
Yeah.
And the Boot Hill Bridge Bundle, which has a lot of focus on bridges in it. We'll talk about that a little bit, the focus on bridge update. That actually is final proposals are in next week, and then that'll be ready for commission action in August by
September.
Yeah, August, September, yeah.
Or August, yeah. Okay. That's good. Thank you, Travis.
Okay, do we have a motion and a second to approve this item?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I move that we approve the bids.
Second.
Is there a second?
I think we hit Mr. Brinkman.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear it.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay, any opposed, same sign. Motion carries. The bid recommendations are approved. Thank you, Travis. Do you have a budget update for us?
Yeah, that's for focus on bridges, but the 2 bridges in this bid opening, they're for around $4.5 million. They were under budget this month, but we're still over budget for the whole program by about $3.5 million. The beginning of a new fiscal year, so today's awards for $20 million is $1.8 million under budget, so a good start for the year. And that's about 8% under budget. So we're just getting started with the new fiscal year, so we're excited to get some jobs out here.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions or comments about the Travis's discussion about the bridges program?
I'd just like to congratulate everybody who's been working on this bridge program. I think it's amazing that what we've gotten done in 1 year, and we owe it to the governor and the legislators who were capable enough to give us this money to keep this going. So good job, Travis. Tell everybody we appreciate it.
Will do, thank you.
Thank you, Travis.
I think I'm next too, so. Stay there.
On the condition of the state bridges?
I'm going to give you the full year, 1 year update on focus on bridges right now.
Wonderful. What we need.
Am I driving?
You're driving.
All right. So I'm going to give you just a really quick update for the Governor's Focus on Bridge program. You know, we're 1 year into it. So just wanted to give you some of the highlights. Of course, Governor Parson had just what I would call a political willpower when he brought this forward, and really looked at those issues that Missourians want. Let's take care of what we have, and bridges are a great item to be taken care of. So he proposed the program last January, and just a little bit of recap. I'm not going to read through everything here, but $350 million for 250 bridges. So So we had these bridges were already in a STIP. That's kind of where that political willpower comes in. It's stuff that we were already looking at, and so we can move it forward and be able to backfill with jobs later on. The initial $50 million was given, of course, during legislative session, and unfortunately, we were successful with the infra grant for I-70, which activated another $301 million for the bridges to have it total. So November 2019 was pretty key too. We did our first $201 million in bonds, and they were sold at the bargain rate of 1.24% interest, which I think anybody would take some of that. So right now, the plan for the next round of bonding would be in November of 21. You know, we're busily putting the jobs out there for that first round of bonding. So what have we done today? So we've prior to today's letting in fiscal year 21, we had 114 bridges already awarded and underway. Of that, MoDOT and the Bridge Division and districts designed 63 of those bridges. Consultants followed up with 51 bridges as well. In addition, last fall, for 70 additional bridges, we let some consultant bundles. This is kind of a little bit of innovation working with Federal Highway. We bundled up the actual design contracts in bundles of 2 up to 10 bridges. And, you know, we actually had pretty good feedback. You know, there were some questions from the consultants early on, but we actually did get some really good responses. For some of the bundles of 10 bridges, we received 20 responses or more from consultants wanting to get those bridge packages. Another thing this did was actually kind of helped us with our design efforts and kind of getting ahead. You know, we've worked for years off the bid opening date to get projects moving and rolling, and you know, just in time delivery, that might be good if you're making F-150s, but if you're designing jobs, you know, you want to kind of get ahead a little bit. So everybody tries to get a Ford reference in for Mr. Smith. So there you go.
What's an F-150?
Yeah, you got that. Yeah. So we try to. This is actually helping our district groups, our district design groups, kind of get ahead a little bit and kind of beat that rush, because you know there's a lot of clearances that have to go on with jobs. So rather than hinge off the letting date, we can hinge off the target plans completion date, so we can keep moving forward. In addition to those 114 plus 70 bridges, you know, in production, I mentioned the Boot Hill Bridge Bundle. That also has 13 bridges, focus on bridges in it as well. So that really helps get the districts jump started and get these projects out. So next few slides are, you know, it's kind of the old bridge measles maps, you know, they show, but this is kind of a little bit more positive one. This kind of shows our progression by quarter of the bridges we've awarded. And you can see how it really is a good program that covers the whole state as we move through. So through the first quarter, you know, we already had 18 bridges out there and awarded and underway. By the next quarter, we added on 53 bridges to 101 bridges, and where we currently set at the end of fiscal year 21 with 114 bridges. So you can tell the districts and have been working busily to get all the clearances done and get these jobs out there for the taxpayers. So current construction budget status, we talk about this every month. So this was just prior to this awards that y'all just did today. So we're doing pretty good on the awards. There's a couple things that kind of push that overage that we have for budget. One of those was we got caught in that flooding activity in Northwest last year. Several of the first bridges were Northwest, and so we kind of got caught in the competition with core work and everything else in Northwest. So we got caught with that. Another thing with this program, once the governor announced the program, we stuck to those original estimates for all those jobs in the STIP. Now, normally with the STIP cycle, we have a 2 to 3% inflation factor that goes in with those jobs. And you can see a year into it, you know, it kind of shows a little bit that, well, even with the flooding, our normal inflation factor is probably pretty accurate, because, you know, we see things go up over time. So with that, we still are pretty hopeful. We're still working on the program to try to get within the total budget. We have 136 bridges remaining with $151 million construction budget left out there. Now, with that, this is just the construction budget, so if you're adding up those numbers, they're not going to add up to the 350. We're also working on tracking that engineering budget as well. So that'll be part of the total package that we track as we go forward, because we can save money on both ends. Hence the bundling of the bridges with the consultants early on as well. So got a few pictures of the bridges here at Route Z in Stoddard County. So this is typical, a lot of simple bridges that we're doing with this program. Here's the remaining schedule that we have for the bridges. Fiscal year 21, we have 89 bridges planned, 20, 35. The fiscal year 23, since we didn't do the full STIP update this cycle due to everything else that's going on, we still have some bridges that show up in fiscal year 23, but the districts are busily working to get those accelerated so we can try to get them all out the door by fiscal year 22. This is another bridge here in Jackson County. You can see it has a little bit of aesthetic features, but that's, in partnership with the city and the county as we move forward as we do those jobs. So, only just a few more snapshots of bridges that are open. This is pretty typical of a bridge down in the southeast part of the state. It'll be typical of several of the bridges that's coming up in the Boudreaux Bridge Bundle that we hope we're successful on. So, and to wrap up, the final one here is in Lincoln County near Winfield that just opened here about a week ago or so, week and a half ago. And currently we have 18 of the bridges open. So we've awarded 114, 18 bridges are open to traffic, and several more are well underway. So with that is just a quick update for the Governor's Focus on Bridge program, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Anyone got a question for Travis? Okay.
All right. Well,
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. There was an earlier question about how many bridges were over 100 years old. None of the bridges in the Focus on Bridge program is over 100 years old, and I'm not going to steal Dennis's thunder on the 100-year-old bridges. I'll let him chat about that whenever he does the bridge update for all bridges in the state. So, all right. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Travis. Our next item is an action item regarding the annual update on bridges. It will be presented by Dennis Heckman, State Bridge Engineer. Dennis?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, got a little bit to share with you for an annual update on our inventory of bridges, all of our bridges. There we go. And I'll talk about the really old ones because we do get asked that quite a bit when I get to one of the director's favorite slides that we update every year. So just in general, I always want to start with public safety and safety of our assets, but all of our bridges are inspected in accordance with federal regulations. We have a real neat picture here somebody took of our reflection in a skyscraper next to one of our bridges. Obviously this was last fall, I think it was, but we have 15 employees in the central office that take these specialized underbridge inspection trucks around the state and look under the bridges, ones you can't reach with ladders, and some of them you can even see from the ground. But the vast majority of our inspection is actually done by district employees. The famous other assigned duties, a lot of our construction inspectors, some highway designers, several people help us out with that across the state. We use a very minimal number of consultants. Most of the bridge inspection is still done by our own folks. And then we mentioned the measles map. I've got more red dots than Travis did because this is all 10,397 bridges. The number of bridges actually does change daily, but we do take a once-a-year snapshot, kind of make it easier to make sure we compare year to year and keep everybody up to date. So the numbers I'll share with you today are the once-a-year snapshot. But that's why we like to say we have about 10,400, because it stays pretty close to that. Poor bridges, these are the ones that are, all bridges are either good, fair, or poor, using national federal standards. And out of our 10,400, we have 893 poor bridges. As you can see, they're all across the state. They're in urban areas, they're in rural areas. The bridges really don't discriminate. They go bad everywhere. So if you look at a multi-year trend, this is the second year in a row we've had a slight decrease. We really had quite a spike from 2017 to 2018, kind of threw it off a little bit. But this fits right in line with our asset management goals that we started aggressively pursuing 3 or 4 years ago. Our goal on bridges is to have about 900 poor bridges. So last year we had 909. This year we have 893. So we're real happy with that. Of course, if you have to travel on one of those 893 poor bridges, you're not too thrilled about it, but all of our bridges are safe. But what happens is once they get poor, They're much more expensive to maintain and keep open, and as you'll see, a lot of them constrict economic development.
Hey, Dennis, if
Yeah.
I could add one thing, our goal isn't to have 900 poor condition bridges. It's a reasonable target because of the funding level we have. So, believe me, for all of the commission who may have heard that, that's our goal would be probably down around 300, which would get us in a cycle of, getting the full useful life out of the bridges. That's an asset management goal that gets set. That just wanted to clarify that point because it's just like safety goals too. We have to make progress and you report your interim goal, but it's not the ultimate goal.
Well, true, and not only that, I was going to mention it would take significant investment just to get down to 300 or 400. But that is kind of the ideal situation, is to have 3 or 4%, so 300 or 400 of your bridges in poor condition. But just to go from 900 down to 300 would take significant investment. Next, we have the graph that shows distribution by decade. In other words, of our 10,400 bridges, what decade were they built? And you can see there is a wave coming, and those that built in the 1950s and 60s are all becoming 60 plus years old now. And quite frankly, most of the bridges back then were designed to last 50 years. And that doesn't mean on the day they turn 50, you close them and you're in trouble. It just means that by and large, they take a lot more money to maintain and keep open. Speaking of the older bridges here, we do have a few from 1900 to 1909. Actually, some of them are from before 1900, but we don't know when they were built. They were there when records started. As you know, MoDOT started early in the 1900s, so there's some bridges we inherited. Some of them used to carry electric trolleys, some of them used to carry horse and buggies, but there's still a few in the system. So if you look at our whole system, we have 47 bridges that are 100 years old or older. So that's not too many, and that's impressive that they made it that long. From an asset management standpoint, the scary part is if you look at how many are 90 years or older, that number jumps to 626. I had never run that number, so that one really stuck out to me. Whenever I thought the 47 seemed a little low, and I see 626 or 90 years or older, that one kind of took my breath away, quite frankly. But it's interesting, you can look at this, the 2 world wars or the 2 decades, we built the fewest bridges because materials and resources were going to the war effort. And the 1930s, we have a bulk of bridges built because of the WPA and that type of work coming out of the Depression. So as you can see, just the most recent, couple decades, we have been making progress, but there's still this wave standing behind us, which I'll get to again when I talk about major bridges. So what does a poor bridge look like? I've got a couple examples. This one carries Route 52 over Katy Trail in Henry County. It's safe, it's open to traffic, but because of this deterioration, it has a 25-ton weight limit. So most tractor trailers weigh 40 tons, so this is restricting economic development. And quite frankly, when you get into this type of weight limit, it can start to hamper certain emergency vehicles even. Another example, this is a bridge we just closed last month in the Northeast District in Scotland County on Route C. When we inspected it 2 years ago, we had to put a weight limit of 37 tons on it. And when we inspected it this year, we had to close it. This is fairly close up, but basically what you're looking at is daylight coming through the structural members that hold up the bridge. That's never a good thing. So we do, like I said, if a bridge isn't safe for any of us to drive on or our families to drive on, we close it. And we don't do that lightly. This one is in the STIP, but it's out in 2023. So if you add up all 893 poor bridges, the area of the deck, the part you drive on, would be equivalent to 132 football fields. So that's just kind of put it in perspective. That's a lot of area of expensive real estate, quite frankly, that we have to try to keep open. The other thing we look at is weight-restricted bridges. This definition is very straightforward. If it has a sign at each end of the bridge telling you what the weight limit is, that is a weight-restricted bridge. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a poor bridge, but as trucks get heavier and heavier, it becomes more important to put those signs up to let them know what bridges they can and can't cross. We have 1,081 weight-restricted bridges, and we have seen a very gradual increase on these, or decrease on these. It's still over 1,000, but it is a slight downward trend. The way we're able to do that most of the time is when you have old bridges that have bad decks, the parts you drive on. When we put a new deck on them to get another 30 years of life, we can usually strengthen them at the same time, so they can now take heavier trucks. It's a very cost-effective way. It's kind of like putting a new roof on your house, because now it stops all the water from leaking through onto the parts underneath. But we're also running out of bridges that's going to work on. We've kind of hit the sweet spot on those. And this is one that's usually pretty striking for people that don't do bridges every day. This shows you the 893 core bridges, the 1,081 weight-restricted bridges. There's only 388 on both. So what that's telling you is most of those weight-restricted bridges were just designed for lighter trucks. In the 1940s, 50s, and even into the 60s, trucks just didn't weigh near as much as they weigh now. So that has a lot of impact on our economic development. So what do we do with those resources we spend on bridges? Well, we do about 60% replacing bridges, and 14% of those redecks, that putting on the new roof I talked about, and then the other 26% is other. Basically, when we show this to people, oftentimes they're like, you have 900 poor bridges, why aren't you just replacing poor bridges? Well, we can't afford to. We have to invest our money in that other to keep the fair bridges fair, and a few of the good bridges good. It's much more cost effective to keep them in the fair category so you don't have to replace them. But that's always a balancing act. You always have a balancing act between pavement and bridges, because neither one is funded appropriately to get the condition we want. But when you're talking about the bridges, what we found is this is a pretty good balancing act to help us with our asset management. I do want to touch base on just a few innovations we're doing. Bridges have a lot of concrete in them, even if the girders are steel. All the columns and footings and the parts you drive on are concrete, and it's reinforced with epoxy-coated rebar. Most people know what rebar is, made out of steel. Works great till it starts to rust. So kind of the ultimate thing the industry's been looking for is rebar that doesn't rust. And two of the kinds we've tried is, the one on the left is called Chromex. It's not quite stainless steel, but it really, it takes thousands of years for it to rust, so nothing we'd have to worry about, but it's still steel. The one on the right is FRP, fiber reinforced polymers. It's basically really fancy plastics or even carbon fibers. It works really well, very strong, it's lightweight, never rusts. The problem with it is you can't bend it. So when you've got a curve on a bridge and you need to bend your rebar to fit in the curve, it can't be bent, it'll break. So you'd have to manufacture it that way, so there's still a lot of hand effort. But we still do a few bridges each year with different rebar like this just to try it out, and actually prices are coming down on both of these. They're still more expensive, but rather than 8 times more expensive than regular steel rebar, it's more like 2 times more expensive. So trying to keep the industry alive and see where the break-even point is for us. Another item that we're getting ready to try out is clear deck form. So basically when I build a new bridge, I put my girders out there. In the old days, they would use plywood and 2x4s to form everything up and pour concrete. Well, we stopped doing that in the late 70s and early 80s because it was just so much labor. So we use a concrete precast panel, or we also use sheets of steel. Well, the problem with those is you can't see the bottom of the deck you poured in the future. It's fine for the first 20 or 30 years, but if you're having problems with the bridge, you'd like to be able to go underneath and look up and see where the problem is. So this is a new product that has been accepted by Federal Highway. It's basically plexiglass on some galvanized steel bars. Its only purpose is to hold the concrete you pour until it reaches strength, and then after that, it's just there. It doesn't serve a structural purpose, but it allows you to see the bottom of the deck. So Indiana's been doing quite a bit of this, and we're working with the firm to see where we can find a cost-effective way to do it in Missouri. I do want to just point out, we do categorize all of our bridges as either typical or major. Typical bridges are those under 1,000 feet long, and major bridges are those over 1,000 feet long. So as you can see, the vast majority of our bridges, 10,200, are typical, and about 209 are major. And once again, they're all over the state. They're in urban areas, they're in rural areas. Some of them are over the Mississippi and Missouri rivers, some of them are over lakes, some of them are big interchanges in the urban areas. So why do we talk about major bridges separately? Well, they make up 2% of our number of bridges, but they're 25% of our deck area. So when I talk about those football fields, 25% of that deck area in the whole state is made up by just 2% of our bridges. So that one of them goes bad, that demonstrates that it's a really costly problem. In fact, a little exercise, if you wanted to replace all 209, it'd be $7 billion. So we won't do that. But they're very different in a lot of different ways too. You know, a typical bridge usually costs about $1 million, whereas the major bridges cost about $200 million. An expected life, our common bridges we do are about 75 years we expect to get out of them now, whereas the major bridges cost or last about 100 years. You've made that huge investment, you want to get a longer, sometimes you need a longer term to get your payback, quite frankly. Detour length is also one of the biggest differences. Oftentimes we have our typical bridge, when we close it, it's a nuisance, but it's not life altering. It might be a 5-mile detour, a 10-mile detour. Our major bridges often have detours of 50 to 80 miles. So that could really, some of them split ambulance districts, some of them split school districts, so you start adding 80 miles each way, it doesn't work. Our typical bridges have an average age of 48 years, and our major bridges have an average age of 38 years. So 38 years is a pretty nice low number for something that's supposed to last 75 to 100 years. The problem is 40 of our major bridges are already more than 60 years old. We've got this really old crop that's still out there and serving us, but they're getting more and more expensive to keep open. So that's a challenging part of our asset management. You have to wash these bridges, you have to seal these bridges, all kinds of preventive maintenance. And this is another wave. We don't have the fancy wave graphic on it. But what this is looking at is just on the major bridges, during every 20 years, how much of our major bridges are turning 75 years old. So if you look backwards, the last 20 years, it's only 600,000 square feet turned 75 years old. But if you look at the next 20 years, there's 4.7 million square feet of those bridges turning 75 years old. And as much as that concerns us, it gets worse as you look further out. So it's definitely something that will continue to eat a larger part of our asset management budget. And we do have in our financial plan, we do look at individual bridges on these major bridges the next 10 years. And these aren't all replacements. They're painting, preventive maintenance, new decks, whatever it takes to get as much life out of them as we can. And this is our asset management graph. The blue is pavements, typical bridges, mobility. You know, that's a slowly growing pot as costs increase. The orange on top is the major bridges. And we do our best to try to level those out, but when these can cost 100 to 200 million a piece, it's really hard to, this is actually better than it was a year ago. Trust me on that. You can't see me, but I'm smiling. Now, we do have currently programmed, Director mentioned Buck O'Neill Bridge in Kansas City. You know, that's going to be kicking off, already kicking off. That'll be well underway shortly. And then the Rocheport Bridge is actually in 2021. And there's a large bridge down in the Southwest District, Route 86 over Table Rock Lake, that's programmed in 2022. Of course, these are all programmed prior to COVID, so these are ones we're actively working on. And usually the big question is which ones are next. Well, we have a bridge in Perry County that goes into Chester, Illinois, in the Southeast District. It's in 2024. This is when the needs are. None of these are funded. Chain of Rocks, which is I-270 over the Mississippi in St. Louis, is 2025. Illinois had a large tax increase. They are moving forward with this project. They're just expecting us to pay our share in 2025. So, Route 291, the Liberty Bridge is in Kansas City. Then there's another one in Southeast over the St. Francis River. And then in Leavenworth, the state of Kansas just notified us that they are moving forward with replacing the bridge over the Missouri River in Leavenworth. And we've told them, well, we can't commit to paying our half. And they said, well, we're going to start designing it and buying it right away. We'll worry about that later. But just gives you an idea, there's a lot of these coming that aren't funded, and these are just the ones that are the highest priority. There's several after that. So with that, is there any questions I can answer for you?
Anyone have any questions?
Dennis?
Yeah.
I have one question for Dennis. This 52 bridge in Windsor, I've had several calls on that, the sail barns right there at the edge of that bridge, and I think it's been an issue. Where are we at on that thing?
That is one I didn't check this week because you usually ask it every month, so you'd think I'd check again. But their crews actually made some repairs to it already, but they're not really sticking. So they're looking to get that in the STIP pretty quick because it is a very good example. A lot of these bridges look the same, but where they're at makes a big difference. This is right by the sail barn. So hundreds of people every week are coming through with trailer loads full of livestock, and that's heavy. So it's been a big impact, especially if we have advance notice that if somebody misses it, now they got to turn around on a road like that with a trailer full of livestock. So it's
That's
not
a pretty
small.
long detour.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a pretty long detour. One more comment, you're talking about trying to make lighter loads. We're trying to do it with Ford. We're building the 150 and it's all aluminum.
Well, Travis liked the joke that everybody tries to get a Ford reference in. You'll notice I took a higher challenge to try to make it through a presentation without a Ford dealer challenge. Apparently I lost, sorry.
Patrick?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just want to point out, we've got a lot of tough jobs here at MoDOT, but being the state bridge engineer, I'd say is going to be right up there near the top. Huge responsibility, very challenging. The funding scenarios that we deal with are extremely challenging. But for anyone that just wants to point out the scariest chart that we see, it's that red chart that showed what's coming in terms of bridge deck replacement on the major bridges alone. The 20 years behind us and our funding that we've had, we have to factor up by 8 times to deal with the bridge deck on major bridges. So if we've got a 100-year average life on major bridges, we need to be replacing more than 2 a year, and we rarely do more than 1. And so we are putting ourselves way behind, and this is a financial challenge this state is unprepared to deal with entirely. And frankly, when you're talking about 50-mile plus detours, this will swallow everything else we do whole if we don't come to a funding scenario where we don't think we can solve it entirely on the state side. We're going to need federal help with that. But this is the issue financially for this enterprise for the next 20 years and the biggest challenge ahead of us. So I think it's important to point that out, and the way Dennis lays out the information like this is really useful because it shows a very complicated problem in a very simple way to understand. Nice job, Dennis.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Our next item is an action item regarding the governor's cost share program, and will be presented by Doug Hood, Assistant Financial Services Director. Doug?
Good afternoon, Chairman Briscoe, Commissioners, Director McKenna. First, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today on the Governor's Transportation Cost Share Program. If you recall, the General Assembly appropriated $50 million in state fiscal year 2020 for MoDOT to work with the Department of Economic Development to create a new transportation cost share program focusing on projects that create an economic benefit for the state. Last fall, the Cost Share Committee, along with the Department of Economic Development, reviewed 48 applications requesting over $91 million in that general revenue funding. The applications were evaluated and ranked based off of their economic impact, applicant share of total project cost, transportation need, and public benefit. Now, projects with the greatest economic benefit were then selected and recommended to the commission for approval. And the commission approved 20 projects totaling $50 million at their January and April 2020 meetings. Now, in response to the financial impacts of COVID, which you heard Patrick talk about that a little bit earlier, 18 projects totaling $46.2 million were delayed into fiscal year 2021 to help close out the state fiscal year 2020 budget. We did have 2 projects that were given the notice to proceed for construction in 2020, though. The remaining 18 projects had not yet advanced to that stage and were delayed into 2021, as I mentioned. In order to deliver the projects that were previously approved by the commission at the January and April meeting, the reappropriation of that $50 million was needed in state fiscal year 2021. Unfortunately, though, the fiscal year 2021 budget only included $25 million in general revenue funding for the Governor's Transportation Cost Share Program. And as a result, MoDOT worked with the Department of Economic Development to determine which previously awarded projects would be funded with that $25 million that was made available in fiscal year 2021. With that, we came up with 9 projects we recommended to the Cost Share Committee for approval based on the original ranking that we did last fall. And this also included the 2 projects that moved forward in construction in fiscal year 2021. And with that, MoDOT recommends commission approval to the projects that are shown in attachment 1 for $25 million. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Patrick, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I'd like to thank Doug and the Cost Share Committee and the Department of Economic Development. This becomes really the first, frankly, cancellation of projects that I would say is related to COVID-19. The general revenue issues I think are well known to everybody, and of course, we're not immune to that by virtue of this program having been appropriated out of general revenue. So having half of the funds available requires us to then go back and maybe work through some disappointment with some communities and project sponsors. And with your approval of this, that'll give us the list on the tail end of this that we'll need to go out and make those communications. I will say that some of those projects may well go forward. They just can't count on this cost share availability or what they applied for. They're all worthy projects and ones that we're disappointed along with the project sponsors for those. But I think the Cost Share Committee, in partnership with the Department of Economic Development, did a nice job of sticking to the original application criteria and economic justification for the projects. It's not, nor was it ever intended to be a perfect allocation around the state. It was intended to be an economic development boost, and the projects were ranked really blind on that basis. So that's what you see here. Were the highest ranked economic development projects out of the applications we received. These are all good projects, and we look forward to working in partnership with the communities and project sponsors to get them off the ground.
Do we have a motion and a second to approve this item?
I move we approve as recommended.
Second.
Okay, all in favor say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Motion carried. The bid recommendations are approved. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next item is an action item regarding the medical plan and will be presented by Ashley Halford, Medical and Life Insurance Plan Board Chair. Ashley?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, and Director McKenna. I want to say thank you for this opportunity to come to you today and present some, I think, good news about the medical plan as we look forward to 2021. I'll conclude today's presentation by asking for your approval of our recommendations as we move forward and start planning for next calendar year. As you may recall, we did make a change in administrators, our medical administrator for 2019. We switched from Aetna to Anthem. That has proven to be a pretty fruitful change for us. While our medical claims themselves were up, our costs were down by $10 million, or about 10% of medical claims for the calendar year 2019. Anthem has proven to be a great partner and has greatly assisted us in moving the needle on our wellness activities and engagement with programs like Live Health Online, which is an online app that you can use from your phone or your computer, in which you have access to 24/7 care via a doctor. That's been very beneficial in the last 6 months with the onset of COVID. They've also brought to us Naturally Slim, which is a nice online weight loss strategies and online coaching for members for weight loss. The other nice thing about the program is where our folks are losing weight, it's successful, and it's not costing them anything out of pocket because it's a free service. They're billing Anthem a preventive service, which is included at 100% under our medical plan. They've also introduced Walker Tracker to us. Walker Tracker is another app that we've introduced to our members, and it is an activity tracker which has allowed us to speed up the administration of incentives and challenges that we have with our force. The nice thing about this is we've done 3 challenges in 2019. We are slotted to do 3 more challenges in 2020. We finished up the year last year in 2019 with a team challenge in which we had challenges for each department. MoDOT had a challenge, and the Highway Patrol had a challenge, and the troops participated, and then all the districts, central office, and MoDOT retirees participated in that Walker Challenge. And the traveling team, or the winning team, got a traveling trophy at the end of the year, at the end of the challenge. I'm proud to say that our MoDOT retirees were strongly represented, and they won the challenge for 2019. And Troop I over at the Highway Patrol was the winning troop for that challenge. Just to kind of reiterate and more of a refresher for you guys, as far as where we are with the medical plan, just as a reminder, the employer-sponsored healthcare has been around for over 43 years. As far as a contributing factor in our healthcare. We are governed by a board of trustees, which I serve as the chair on. We have 4 active MoDOT employees, 2 active Highway Patrol employees, and a retiree from each organization on that board. We do offer 2 different plan options. One is being a PPO with a $600 deductible, and then we have a high deductible healthcare plan with an HSA, and those are our 2 plan options. Currently serve just over 27,000 lives in our medical plan. 65% of that is made up of active employees. About 9% of that is made up of what we consider pre-65 retirees. And then another 25% make up our Medicare population. So that's how our plan is comprised. We do service out our administrators for medical and pharmacy. Anthem, as I mentioned, we're in our 2nd year with Anthem, which has been very advantageous financially for us and from a service level perspective. MedImpact is our pharmacy vendor, and we are actually just in our 6th year now with them. We've got a new contract starting this year, which has resulted in a 5% savings in admin fees. Moving along here, just kind of wanted to just bring this to your attention so you can kind of see where the contributions are coming from and how the plan is funded. This is over the scope of 2019 back to 2014. For 2019, the employers contributed $93.12 million towards the premiums, whereas the employees contributed $40.6 million, which has held steady over the last couple of years, which is kind of a nice feature that we're not asking for more additional money on top of what we already are asking for. Just to kind of show the financial stability, I know many of you guys on the commission were here when we were having this conversation about 4 years ago, and the story wasn't quite the same. It was a very dire financial situation the medical plan was in, but thanks to your support and funding, we have renewed our financial stability. You'll see there in 2019, we finished the year at $42.8 million in that position. pleased to say that so far through May of this year, we're now at 46.3 million, so we're still making positive progress in that regard. I wanted to share this slide with you because I just wanted to give you a piece of the information that we are looking at when we meet with our actuary a couple times a year. This is where they provide us some estimates of what our income and expenses are going to be. They're scoping out where our retained earnings are going to look like. They give us projections of what premium should look like in the next 5 years. And then the bottom line there is really what that's our target goal, right? So they're anticipating us to be at 30.4% of retained earnings of the total expenses. Really, our goal on that, our target is going to be 15%, which is where you see they've got us lined out for it at the end of 2025. Okay, we'll keep moving through. New this year, something that we have not had to monitor or track or really look at before, is COVID-19 and the claims and how that impacts us as plan members. Back in March, we implemented our emergency response plan when it came to the medical plan, which meant that it opened up networks, it allowed people to get prescriptions filled earlier than normal. But a couple other changes we made is the plan now covers 100% for any sort of COVID screening and or the antibody test, and that will be covered at 100% through the end of the calendar year. And then we also opened up the Live Health Online, that telehealth benefit. That's covered at 100% for all of our members through the end of September. The interesting thing, I know I've put this data up here, and that's as of June 25th. Just to kind of give you an idea of how these numbers are moving and how quickly they can move. As of yesterday, as of July 7th, we tested 339 administered tests. We've got 32 positive tests. We've got 7 now inpatient hospitalizations, with 1 being in ICU. The longest hospital stay was 16 days, and the shortest was 1 day. We've got a total spend of $384,000 now in the course of another 10 days. So I consider that a pretty significant jump. One high ICU hospital stay, we anticipate about $100,000. Okay, so that's how quickly these things can swing on us. The other thing that what we anticipated when this all began is, since we do have such a large retiree population of over 6,000 people, we expected that to be the hardest hit segment of our population, because they're saying that they're the most susceptible to the illness. But what we're really seeing when we look at our claims data, of that $384,000 that I said we've spent, the largest segment of that population is in the 45 to 54-year-olds. And then the next highest range after that is the 18 to 26-year-olds. So it's not the population at all that we expected to see the claims cost in. Just, kind of a little summary slide, as far as our outlook and where we're going. Things are moving really, really well for us right now. The move to Anthem has been proven to be very advantageous for us. We've finally regained some financial stability thanks to your support and financial backing. And we continue to do good things as far as health and wellness goes. So, with that being said, our recommendation for the Commission today, for your consideration, is to approve that we have no medical plan premium increases for the calendar year 2021 in all rate categories, that we continue to offer two plan options, the PPO and the high deductible health care plan. We also are proposing that we increase the employer contribution to our HSA. For an individual, increase that to $500, and all of the rate categories increase it to $1,000. Our current contributions that we have right now is $250. These are annual contributions, by the way. $250 for individuals and $500 for all other rate categories. The anticipated financial impact to the plan would be $130,000 to increase those contributions. These recommendations are projected to provide adequate funding while maintaining an appropriate plan premium stabilization reserve. The premium stabilization reserve goal is $30 million, as I pointed out before, is that 15%. That's established by our plan actuary, and it's intended to be set aside to prevent from dramatic fluctuations in premiums. you know, the more balanced those that go over the time, the better off we are. The exciting part of this is the fourth consecutive year that we're going to pass along no rate increases to our active employees. And the other thing is when you look back over a 10-year span, the average increase for active employees is only 3.2% in your medical premiums. I'd venture to guess and put that out there on the street to see what other company could offer and say the same thing. I think that's something that we're super proud of here as an organization. And with that, I'd like to thank the commission, the executive team from both the MoDOT and the Highway Patrol for their full support and backing over the years. You know, we wouldn't be in the position we are today if it wasn't for your guys' support. So with that, I would be happy to address any questions or concerns you may have.
Ashley, I have a question. This is Greg Smith. Did you say the fourth year that we hadn't had an increase?
Yes, back in 2018, there was a premium increase, but the commission agreed to absorb that increase. So
Yeah,
it's not to active employees.
Okay, that's what I thought that was right, but okay, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions or comments for Ashley?
I just would like to add to what Greg was in the meeting that, you know, I think it's great that we can do this over a period of years for the employees, especially considering all the sacrifices they're making up here. And I congratulate you on keeping those rates down.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'd make a motion that we approve the recommendation on the medical plan funding.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion of the motion or any further discussion of Ashley's report?
Yeah, I would just say, to echo what Commissioner Brinkman said, you know, this is, you know, I think Ashley did a good job of spreading the credit around here, but this is good stewardship. This is what good stewardship does, and Ashley's been a very strong leader, working with the board. It's a combination board set up between the department and the Highway Patrol has members on it. Very well functioning. Focused on expenses, and amazing what that focus can do. Changing some contracts has saved tens of millions of dollars, and that has gone to that reserve bottom line at a time when premiums have continued to rise in medical plans all around. We've increased our reserves and held the line on premiums, which is a huge benefit to the employee base of both the Patrol and MoDOT itself, and also the retirees that draw on this plan as well. It's good stewardship, it's good management, it's not accidental. Ashley didn't trip into this report. This is active management, and it's really well done. So thank you for that, and great job with the board as well.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah, thank you, Ashley. It's no fun dealing with insurance at all. So maybe I can hire you on the side to help me with mine.
Okay, the motion has been made and seconded. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Okay, the motion carries. Thank you again, Ashley. We appreciate it. Okay, now we've come to the items removed from the consent agenda. Is there anything we have to do on any of those?
Nothing on that today.
Nothing on those. Okay, typically at the end of each meeting, we like to provide each commission member with the opportunity to share any concerns or comments they may have. Today, we'll start with Commissioner Ecker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank Greg and Bob and John and Patrick for your service on IMPERS and dealing with that. It's an important issue, and I just want to thank you for your service on that and fighting the battle. I also want to thank Marty Lyles and the Assistant District Engineer in Northwest District and and Chris Redline and Patrick and his team for facing the challenges of the Sullivan County project. And I know it wasn't on the to-do list, but it is now. So I want to thank everyone for doing that. And, also, I noticed in some of the backup material in Patrick's briefings that he does, it was talked about the homeless encampments again in St. Louis, and as we talked about that before, I just am in awe of the everyday extra duties that the MoDOT employees have to do, and dealing with that. I just can't thank them enough for dealing with something that they really shouldn't have to be dealing with. So if you could pass that along, I'd appreciate it. It's great to hear that Buck O'Neill's progress. And then also Dennis for doing a great job with the bridges. That's got to be a tough job, but it's always neat to see a new bridge go in place. And then everybody's been doing a great job, and I noticed, I can't remember if it was on social media or where I saw it, but how the governor was praising Patrick and the department for staying on top of managing their budget and finances during this time of COVID and the effect it's having on the economy. So that's all I have.
Thanks, Terry. Now what about Commissioner Brinkman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have much, but I'd like to thank Pam and her staff for these meetings are getting better, or else we're getting used to it. But I do think it's getting better with this format here. And Mr. Chair, I wanted to tell you how disappointed I am that I'm not going to be able to go to New London next month because I've never been to that metropolis. And lastly, I just want to echo what Terry said. To see those bridges come down, it's another example of how we do so much with so little, and the staff we have that are able to figure all that out. I think it's just amazing. But so, great job, Dennis, and congratulations to your group. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Brinkman. Commissioner Waters, what about you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, first of all, between our closed meeting and our open meeting, I text Mike Pace and wished him happy birthday. Today's his birthday, and he wanted me to pass along best wishes to all his MoDOT friends. So happy birthday to him, and best wishes from Mike to all of you. I stayed up last night till 1 o'clock reading our backup material, 687 pages of material that we got this month, and you kind of want to complain about it, but at the same time, I know that there's a lot of work that goes into that backup material, and somebody writes all that stuff, and I want to just pass on that I appreciate getting the information that we do, and I appreciate the time and effort that it takes to put all that together. I know Pam and Jennifer and her staff work awful hard on it, but individuals throughout our whole organization work to bring that material to us. So thank you for that. And then finally, I'm wanting to get out of here, get on a combine, but I did want to mention it sure is hot out today, and the last several days it's been pretty warm, and I think about those crews out there on the pavement, and just want to remind everybody to keep them safe by paying attention to them, and for them to stay safe while they're out there in that heat. So best wishes, everybody, and have a good summer.
Thanks, Tom. Commissioner Smith, what about you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I just want to thank Pam and Jen and for getting this meeting set up again. I know it's a lot of work, but it's really working out good. And Patrick, I want to thank you for all your efforts that you do for your team, from MPERS to just the daily activities. It doesn't go unnoticed. We really, really, really appreciate you. And Dennis, that was a great report on bridges. I appreciate that. I always like to hear about bridges, but that's about all I've got. I look forward to getting together with you guys again soon. And, hopefully this COVID deal will ease. It's a little nerve-wracking, I think, to everybody right now, but we appreciate all of it, and all of you stay safe. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Greg, and thanks to all of you commissioners. And I'll be glad, of course, whenever this COVID business is over with, if it ever is, because I do miss the sessions when we are able to be together and have just have private visits, not necessarily, obviously not about business, but anyway, I miss that, and I can't stress enough how much we need to continue the pursuit of this MPERS deal, because it is vitally important, I think, that we not allow these characters to gamble with the retirement funds of people that have been out here working for MoDOT and for the Highway Patrol for 20, 30 years. I think it's very important that we continue to follow up on that issue. And the other thing I want, if Tom is still there, what day or what birthday is this for Mike Pace?
I'm not sure. I can't tell you.
Okay. Today's my
I think it's 71.
71. It's 71.
All right. Okay.
Tom, I wished him happy birthday early this morning. Mr. Chairman, one more thing. You know, we really need to preach and practice this seatbelt. This increase in fatalities is horrible. You know, every time I see a ambulance or a highway patrol go by, where's my grandkids at? You know, it's just, you worry about everybody, but it's so easy to put your seatbelt on, and we just need to keep beating the drum. I know all of you do, but we just need to keep up that good work.
Thank you. We have a sheriff's race in our county this year, and the deputies play with their sirens and their lights, and it's become a joke in our county. So thankfully the Highway Patrol doesn't do that. And then the other thing, to Commissioner Brinkman, I'm also sorry you're not going to be able to attend the meeting in New London, but I hope at some point all of you can come to New London and enjoy seeing our courthouse. And there's not much left in New London except the courthouse and my office. But anyway, before we adjourn, I want to note that our next meeting is scheduled as an electronic ballot for August 12, 2020. This means there will be no virtual meeting next month. We'll be back online in September. Do we have a motion and a second to adjourn this meeting?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed no. The ayes have it. The meeting's adjourned.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.